Freshwater in Aotearoa, New Zealand is in a dire state.
Now, like everywhere you see is dairy.
They have polluted the water from because of the dairy farms.
The dairy industry thumbs their nose.
This modification to prop up a system that's ultimately unsustainable.
I don't see why dairy cows have clean water and I've got to drink dirty water.
It's a fast dollar. We have the fast dollar over preserving our own.
The water is dead.
Drinking water is contaminated. Rivers are unswimmable. Lakes are choking on toxic algae. The iconic braided rivers that were once full of life and a major source of food have been seriously damaged. For decades, the intensive dairy industry has been allowed to pollute water for profit. The overuse of synthetic nitrogen fertiliser has contaminated waterways, and effluent brings its own bacterial risks. It's regular people who pay the price for this damage. My name is Appelbe, and I'm Greenpeace Aotearoa's freshwater campaigner. I've lived in Waitaha, Canterbury my whole life, growing up in Timaru before moving to Christchurch. During my lifetime, I've watched as freshwater declines dramatically, yet decision makers have failed to address the source of the pollution. This is Canterbury's dirty secret, a national disgrace. And now, we're breaking the dam of silence around this crisis. Our first stop in this journey was back to my hometown and the river I grew up swimming in, the Aotearoa River. The water quality in the Aotearoa, like many rivers in the region, deteriorates regularly, especially during the summer months and following heavy rainfall. The river tests for dangerous levels of pathogens regularly. A major contributor is runoff from intensive dairy farming. So this here is growing in the river, and it thrives on the nitrogen that flows into the water, and it chokes up the river and it sucks all the oxygen out of the river, and it makes it a lot harder for fish and other aquatic life to thrive. Even though the water looks clear, I wouldn't be swimming in it. It's not a healthy river. This was one of the rivers I used to come to swim and to camp. On the other side, closer to the bank, there's a swimming hole that we used to swim in. All of this area over here where gorse is growing, that wasn't previously there, and we used to be able to camp out. It's hard to think about because, like, what I got to experience, a lot of people don't, and it hasn't taken long for that to happen. Pauline is from Temuka, which is just a short drive north from Timaru. She recently returned to Aotearoa and was shocked to see the state of the river.
The Temuka River was our swimming pool, and we virtually lived on the river. Everybody learnt to swim in it. Country people used to come there on weekends and have picnics, and the kids would be all swimming and we'd be showing all these country kids how smart we were. Like growing up, you could drink the water in both the rivers, in the Aotearoa and the Temuka. You had no fear about drinking the water. And right up until the mid-70s, when I used to go back, take the go back for holidays with my children. You could still swim in it, but it wasn't like 20 years before, or even 15 years before. I would probably go so far as to say it'd be hard-pressed to find anything living in it, just looking at the state of it. The first time I think I cried. First time I saw how bad it was. Dairy is a big polluter. What washes down into the rivers. There's not a lot of thought goes into it. It's a fast dollar. We have the fast dollar over preserving our own. Indigenous people have managed to live off the land and off the waterways for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and still doing it. There's a thought amongst a lot of Indigenous people around the world that allow the Indigenous people to manage the conservation and water, and will make a better job of it.
We're here at the Temuka River, and this river currently has a do not swim notice because there has been samples tested with fecal bacteria, most likely E. coli, and this is a result of pollution from the dairy industry. What we've seen behind us here is what looks to be toxic algae. Toxic algae grows really well when there are three main conditions: warm water, slow moving water, and excess nutrients like nitrogen from synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. This stuff is particularly harmful to humans, but also to dogs and other animals as well. Over the long term, over the last 5 years, the amount of toxic, harmful pollutants, bacteria and so forth, it tests high enough so regularly, you just wouldn't want to risk it. Joan Bergman is from Ngāi Tuahuriri, and she spent her whole life living in the Tuahiwi area, which is just outside of Kaiapoi.
I would like to say that we have 7 generations of my whānau that have fished in that river, and so we know it very well. And it is a taonga that we treasure, and we have tried to look after it, but because of farmers and other people who think that money is far more important than the river, then it's been degraded to the state it is now, which makes us very sad, actually. All our lives, our mother brought us up to think that the river was part of us and that we had to look after it. She saw it at the end of her life and just couldn't believe that people could do things like that. She didn't understand, actually, why people would ever want to do anything like that to a river, but of course her generation would not do it. Over the years we saw what was happening to it, especially, like I say, when farming went to cows rather than cropping and sheep. We would go to meetings to try and stop it, but no, they would say, well, you know, you don't have any technical, you don't have any answers that can be put on paper. Environment Canterbury was run by farmers. Simple as that, really. And so, of course, they didn't want to do these things like fencing off the rivers and not having so many bores. Oh, it makes us so angry and sad to see how it's been degraded and how our children's children can't swim in it. It's just unhealthy. You just don't do it.
Marutou, who's also from Tuahiwi, took us to the Taranaki stream, which flows into the Rakahuri. He's gathered eels, whitebait and watercress from the river his whole life, but now he's not sure whether he will be able to continue doing this. Madu told us that over the last 12 years, the rate of decline in these rivers had increased dramatically.
So over the years since I've been a kid to now, I've watched the opposite of development of this creek. We used to swim in here when we were kids and having a great time, but now there's no way. It'd be good for everyone involved if you could still come down and catch a kai here and take it home and feed everyone and take it down the marae. So this is the Taranaki stream. I've noticed over the years, since about 2012-14, that the water started going this funny looking colour, murky, brownish, tea coloured. There's no greenery anymore. It's all kind of flat and nothing going on, and it used to be quite green vegetation over there. So in high tide, the water goes over those reeds and then drops, and it's caused this ugly brown colour at the bottom. You can see it over there. It's a dirtiness, and it's tainted the colour of the weed. It used to be all shingle through there, but now it's all mud, and it's developed in the last decade. It's gotten worse as each year goes by. Yeah, it used to be a great place to whitebait, but now I'm thinking not even whitebaiting anymore because I don't want to feed my kids the food out of here, the whitebait.
Madu also showed us the floodgates that had been established to protect the surrounding farmland.
This floodgate never used to be here either. It's just a man-made thing that's it's doing its job, but it's actually making the build-up, all the mud happen too. The river hasn't got a natural way of hitting a reset button, which is just washing all the stuff out. Then it just built up. The river has to be able to clean itself, and these floodgates, they prevent the river from cleaning itself. And when it floods, you've got to get rid of all the rubbish, but it doesn't, it just builds up here. And that's half the problem too. It doesn't have a chance to get clean. So if they took this down for 10, 20, 30, 50 years, I'm thinking it would improve. It's a bit like how you burn grass, like in the savannah. When it burns, it just regenerates itself, and same as a flood, it just regenerates itself after a flood. But it's not getting a chance to do that. The water itself it's getting worse every year.
So we are passing through Selwyn Huts. We're driving down to the lower Selwyn Huts, which is at the mouth of the Selwyn River that flows into Waitewater, and it's utterly polluted. So we've just driven through past the Selwyn Huts, and we've walked down the Angler's Path towards this spot. The significance of this area is, behind us is Te Waihora, and just to the left of me is the mouth of the Selwyn River. It's a beautiful spot. Most people watching this will probably look at the scenery behind me and think it's beautiful, and it is, but it doesn't take much to look a little closer and see a lot that is not beautiful. This water right here is green. I would not drink it. I definitely wouldn't swim in it. Te Waihora, it's a environmental catastrophe. The Selwyn River is polluted. The source of all this pollution it's the dairy industry. That's why there's elevated levels of E. coli. That's why there's nitrates in the water here. It's because we have too many cows in Canterbury and we're using too much synthetic nitrogen fertiliser. Everywhere in Canterbury we've seen the same problems. Lakes and rivers choked with algae, contaminated with E. coli and nitrate, many of them unsafe for swimming. And local communities, especially those on private water supplies, have drinking water contaminated with nitrate, which is putting it risk their health. The source of the pollution is clear. The regional council have failed to act to prevent the source of that pollution. The question is why? If you travel through Canterbury in winter, it's common to see mud farming, also known as intensive winter grazing. This is when cattle are made to graze on fodder crop and forced to stand in the muddy paddock that remains. Cows want to lie on soft pastures, and it's stressful when they can't. In spite of what people might think, cows hate mud, just like us. We went to a non-mud farm. To make matters worse, they mud farm on a riverbed and draw precious water for irrigation. Nikki Snoyink, a Canterbury resident, took us out to the Rakaia River, where the links between freshwater pollution and intensive winter grazing became a whole lot clearer.
Well, the river's just up here. So this is basically riverbed, reclaimed riverbed that has been converted into farmland. Yeah. They have built these stop banks because, as you'll see when we go out there, they are to protect their gallery for their own irrigation intake. There's 4 bores along here that this farm has, and that bore used to be in the paddock, but the river has reclaimed the paddock, and now they have reinstated their bore, which is actually out there in the riverbed and protected by this stop bank. There's been massive changes down here since my youth. When I was a kid, we came down here, all of this sort of farming in the riverbed wasn't here back then, and it was a much more wild place with scrub and little channels of water and a really cool place to run around and have an adventure. What's going on around here is not acceptable. Down here in the riverbed, this kind of farming down here in the riverbed and this modification to prop up a system that's ultimately unsustainable is absolutely not acceptable. In this riverbed, beside this river, that has a water conservation order on it. Down there, even in the middle of the Rakaia River, the river sort of splits in two, and in the middle is a big place called Rakaia Island. That is a dairy farm in the middle of the river on stony ground. Yeah, it's extraordinary that has been allowed to happen out there. So same sort of thing really. You know, modification of the riverbed to protect their assets out there. Loss of natural character. Water being taken out, siphoned out all along the way. You know, Central Plains is just one scheme, but lots of people like this one, they have the ability to extract water out of here as well. And that's all taken from the system. So cumulatively, by the time this river makes it to the sea, it's a shadow of its former self up here. There's a real disconnect in that thinking. It's like we need to stop putting the pollution on, and then that'll clean the water up. It may take a generation, but let's just change the land use before expecting the community to pay again.
Nikki also took us to one of the key irrigation sources in Canterbury that intensive dairy farming depends on to exist.
So this is the end of the Central Plains Canal. The water comes from the Rakaia, where the start of the canal is. And here the water goes through that contraption over there, over to that pump station, and then it's distributed from here all over the command area for the irrigation scheme. That's water taken out of the braided river system and reducing the flow of the river, essentially, and reducing its ability to behave like a braided river, which is lots of water flowing all over the place in its riverbed, and also preventing that water from filtering down through the stones and resupplying the aquifers.
Irrigators like this, you'll see these all over Canterbury. It's a pretty common sight. Irrigation might seem like a simple solution to grow grass for dairy cattle through dry periods, but it comes at a heavy environmental cost. By diverting water to pastures, irrigation drains rivers and underground water supplies, disrupting the natural balance that keeps ecosystems healthy. Alongside this, thousands of hectares of forest and native plants that can hold water effectively have been cleared to make way for farmland that can't. Because irrigation soaks the land unnaturally, it flushes contaminants into waterways, harming fish, wildlife, and of course drinking water, especially when there is heavy rain. Irrigation doesn't just change the landscape, it reduces river flows and upsets the delicate systems that keep our water clean and aquatic habitats alive. Unnatural water extraction is one of the major inputs keeping the New Zealand dairy industry afloat at scale. Aotearoa doesn't deserve to have the health of waterways traded away for dairy industry profits. It's only in the last 35 years that dairying has become such a huge industry. So what changed? New Zealand went through a dairy boom in the 1990s. International dairy prices were high. Sheep and beef weren't making as much money. Conversion of farmland to intensive dairying skyrocketed. Canterbury went from 112,000 dairy cattle in 1990 to 1.25 million in 2023, blowing past the region's ecological limits. Since 2002, the use of synthetic nitrogen fertiliser in Canterbury has increased 300% to squeeze ever more dairy cows onto the land. After decades of dairy expansion, towns across rural New Zealand have had to deal with increasingly polluted drinking water. When E. coli exceeds the legal health limits in a town supply, entire communities have to be issued a boil water notice. But nitrate can't be removed from water by boiling. Instead, a do not drink notice is issued. We travelled to Glenavi, a small town near Waimate, to speak with locals who have been issued several do not drink notices, most recently in 2024, because of nitrate contamination. Since they couldn't drink the water from their kitchen tap, they had to travel to the Glenavi Town Hall, where one of several water tanks was supplied by the Waimate District Council.
So we come like every second day, get the fresh water from the tank, because the nitrate levels are high and we can't have a drinking water in our house. But definitely we are worried because water is a thing like we use every day and it's a big need for us. They have polluted the water from because of the dairy farms and all that, they're adding chemicals and going in the soil and it might have affected the water. The New Zealand, there are so many sources of water, fresh water sources in New Zealand, and I think it's a bit bad, like still we having a nitrate problem in the water, and it shouldn't be like that. I think the council has to look forward for that. They have to test the water and they have to find out the proper reason why it's happening or what's the exact reason behind it, and they have to fix it permanently.
This is an older community, so it's not as easy for everyone to walk or drive up the roads to get their water. They've shared their frustrations that this has happened for the second time in 2 years. They've talked about their concerns about the long-term safety of the water. Most of all though, people here are disgusted that in a country with such a plentiful supply of water, they can't drink the water from their kitchen tap. We asked around town and we're told that there was one person in particular who would be good to speak to about the situation.
There's so many old retired couples around here that aren't the best on driving or walking sort of style, and it's very hard on them. So they've got to get in their car, take their water bottles, take it round to the taps at the tank of fresh water that comes from Temuka, I think, and fill up their water so they're drinking out of bottled water that they've got out of the tank. The neighbour, she could hardly walk sort of style, let alone drive. I was taking my filtering water and putting bottles over there for her. Pregnant ladies can't drink the water. They can't, if they've already had babies, they can't mix that with their mixture. And so, yeah, it's not good. We, as ratepayers, have done nothing wrong, but we're expected to pay for correcting the water. That'll come through in our rates because the water is going to take so much more. And yet the dairy industry thumbs their nose. You know, we're all expected to have drinking water. That's one of the basic and water that you can actually drink.
History has shown us that during challenging times, our region pulls together and supports one another. And nowhere is that more so the case than Rangiora, who housed and fed and looked after folks during some of their most difficult times. Rangiora was one of the many towns to offer support to people who needed it following the Christchurch earthquakes in 2011. We hosted a public meeting to talk about nitrate contamination in fresh water. We were joined by a familiar face, Nikki Snoyink, who has spent years campaigning to protect fresh water, Karen Rogers, a former researcher from GNS Science, whose work centred around drinking water contamination, and Tim Chambers, Associate Professor at University of Canterbury, who's done extensive research on nitrate contamination. The panel talked about the numerous issues around freshwater degradation and what could be done about it. It was a chance for Rangiora and North Canterbury residents to hear from the experts and also ask questions.
Our rivers have deteriorated something shocking in the last 5 years. And they're blaming salt inclusion, all the oxygen weed is dying, the whitebait habitat is not there. Like, I'm keen on fishing, the children, you can't take the children fly fishing anymore because there's no cockabillies, the water is dead.
Local legend and angler Paul Hodgson spoke with us after the meeting.
All the fish and birds and all the native seem to be disappearing at an alarming rate. In the Selwyn, I've noticed that for the last 20 odd years, it's dramatically changed. It's got worse. I took my kids swimming there, and within an hour of swimming at Coes Ford, both the kids were complaining of itchiness and scratching, and I had to take them both to hospital on the way home. It's probably fair to say that all the recreational values have rapidly declined. I used to, when I was a kid, you just went to the river. You didn't think about it. Now you have to check on various websites to see whether it's safe to swim. I think ECAN has to take responsibility. In the Selwyn zone, they plan to double the nitrate loadings in the 2010 plan. With mitigation, they only hope to increase it 50%. Well, hang on here a minute. That's not environmentally responsible. I doubt whether very much it's going to be economically responsible. given that the Selwyn District Council is now talking about spending up to $400 million to clean up their water supply. I don't see why dairy cows have clean water and I've got to drink dirty water. It never entered my mind that we'd end up with consented pollution. It didn't enter into my mind that this is going to take 10, 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years to fix. That just doesn't sit right. We're a small country, we need to look after each other, and economic gain has to be an economic gain, not at the expense of one party that the other party's profiting from it.
So how does dairy pollution cause nitrates contamination in people's drinking water? To grow enough pasture to feed all the cattle, you need water and nitrogen, particularly in Canterbury, which isn't naturally suited to dairy farming. New Zealand's use of synthetic nitrogen fertiliser has increased more than 600% over the last 3 decades. This has drastically increased the level of nitrate contamination, and it's happening in various ways. When livestock, like cows, roam near rivers or lakes, their waste can wash straight into the water, carrying harmful contaminants with it. Dairy runoff due to heavy rain or irrigation can flush polluted water from farms into streams and rivers. Nitrate from cow urine can also seep through the soil, contaminating underground water supplies. In places like the Canterbury Plains, where the soil is porous, this risk is even higher. Nitrate contamination not only makes our drinking water supply unsafe, but also causes harm to wildlife and ecosystems. But what about the human health risks? As part of his research, Tim Chambers has been investigating the potential health burden of nitrate contamination in drinking water.
So my work is really focused on environmental health, so how the environment affects our health, and that can be both the built and the natural environment, and drinking water has been a big part of that. So how we protect our freshwater sources and how contamination of those sources can impact our health. Yeah, so there will be some large epidemiological studies that were published overseas, one in particular in Denmark, that drew our attention to this being a particular issue. And so we thought, because we have nitrate contamination in New Zealand, this is an issue that we should be interested in, at least try and scope out to see if it could be a problem. And so we started the work to try and compile the evidence to look at what the current levels of nitrate were in drinking water and try and figure out what the potential risk could be. Yeah, so there's established risks for infants less than 6 months old, a condition called blue baby syndrome, really nasty condition, and that happens at levels at 11.3 milligrams per litre, and that's what we have our drinking water standard on, and that was first established by WHO back in the 1950s. But since then, and more recently, we're starting to see other health outcomes that have been associated with nitrate contamination, and those have been bowel cancer and also preterm birth and other pregnancy outcomes. Water suppliers have a responsibility to provide water that's compliant with the drinking water standards and is of best quality as it can be. And so really, collectively, we need to work better together to try and ensure that we protect source water and make sure we're providing safe, clean drinking water to all. At the moment, it should be the regional councils. They're the environmental regulator. They're the ones that are tasked with preventing contamination in our freshwater sources. At the moment, they are required to try and prevent contamination up until the MAV, so 11.3. And because the health evidence is not precautionary either, means that people or the regulations are allowed to permit land use that can pollute up to that level. I think we can do a much better job of source water protection. We don't want to get 20 years down the road of the current levels of land use and contamination and then realise actually the health impact's much lower than the current MAV, and then it's going to be very hard to undo that, and it's going to put a large proportion of the population at risk.
There is a growing body of scientific evidence that has linked nitrate levels much lower than the current drinking water standards with several risks to human health. These include increased risks of bowel cancer from long-term exposure to levels of nitrate as low as 1 milligram per litre, and an increased risk of preterm birth if pregnant people drink water contaminated with nitrate at levels of 5 milligrams per litre or higher. This is much lower than the current New Zealand health limit of 11.3 milligrams per litre. which was set over 60 years ago to respond to the risk of blue baby syndrome, but it hasn't been updated to include the newer health science. Karen hit the road with us after the town hall meeting in Rangiora and joined us in Oxford. We've collaborated with Karen as part of her work on drinking water contamination in rural areas.
So recently we've been doing a concurrent study along with Greenpeace looking at the nitrate levels in people's drinking water with a focus particularly on rural residents who drink water from bores or springs or surface water, creeks, rivers, that type of thing. And a lot of the data in some areas is quite concerning. So we've been mapping these nitrate numbers to identify which regions are definitely a hazard and a risk. Areas such as Waikato, Canterbury and Southland definitely have ongoing nitrate problems, and the levels are beyond acceptable values in quite a few instances. I think the problems in Canterbury are much more severe due to the intensification of farming in the region and the general geology of the subsurface, which allows that the nutrients to flow straight through. The people that are most vulnerable to health risks with contaminated water are obviously the young, babies and children, pregnant ladies, and obviously anyone who's chronically ill or elderly, because these people have lowered immune systems, their metabolisms don't work as well as a healthy adult, and they're more prone to sickness and illness. We're clearly seeing that there is rural drinking water disparity compared to most town supplies, and it's this issue where everyone has the right to clean, safe drinking water that is low level nitrates. The maximum acceptable value of 11.3 milligrams was set more than 50 or 60 years ago by the World Health Organization. If people are not aware of this issue, then it's only going to get worse and they will find themselves with undrinkable water.
District councils and private bore owners have all of the responsibility to supply safe drinking water, but they have no control over the quality of the sources of that water. It's regional councils like Environment Canterbury that hold the responsibility to protect drinking water sources from dairy pollution. We spoke to Environment Canterbury's Director of Science, Dr. Tim Davey, to see what they're doing about freshwater degradation.
Do you think the dairy industry is responsible for the degraded and worsening quality of freshwater in Canterbury? And if not, what is the source of the problem in Canterbury and degraded freshwater?
Dairy and intensive agriculture has led to increasing pressures on our water quality.
Your data says that 59% of monitored sites are showing worsening levels of nitrates. Does that not indicate that the problem is getting worse to ECAN?
It indicates that we've got a severe problem, for sure. Environment Canterbury has recognised for a very long time that nitrate is a major problem and a major contaminant in our waterways. Mm-hmm. It has been working on this. I started in Environment Canterbury in 2008. We have been identifying it and pushing it as a major issue since before then. So it has been identified for a very long time.
He's not wrong. This has been a problem for a very long time. Too long, in fact. And decisions made by Environment Canterbury in more recent years have made the problem worse. In 2015, ECAN approved changes to irrigation practices, despite a report showing the changes would likely result in an increase of nitrate contamination in the Waimate district. That's where Glenavy is located, which has since had 2 do not drink notices due to nitrate contamination. Identifying a problem is meaningless without action to fix it. The good news is that Environment Canterbury is a regional council, which means we get to vote for the councillors who make and enforce the rules. We also asked about new rules implemented in the Canterbury Land and Water Regional Plan and the upcoming Integrated Regional Planning Framework. This will eventually be proposed to the public, and we'll all get to have a say on what's in it.
People applying for resource consent now, it will become more and more difficult for them to get resource consents, and they'll have to put more things in place. The second point is that the revised plan that will be coming through in 2028 is planned for 2028. That will be looking at what those limits are and are we reaching them, and have we got the right mechanisms in place to reach them.
What about Environment Canterbury's responsibility to protect human health? We asked whether it would be prudent for ECAN to take a precautionary approach in order to avoid any potential negative health impacts. Tim Davey wouldn't give us a view, other than to say that we need to talk to someone else.
We wrote to the Ministry of Health asking for more research into the impacts of nitrates on human health. That was around, I can't remember, 4 or 5 years ago. We have not downplayed the impacts. You're asking me a health-related question. That needs to go to the Department of Health or to somebody who's medically trained. I can't answer that question.
It is well established that regional councils like Environment Canterbury are responsible for protecting sources of drinking water. That is their duty, and right now they're failing. For people living with nitrate-contaminated drinking water, it doesn't matter how long ECAN has been working on this issue. They need action now. Greenpeace Aotearoa has been working hard to push decision makers to take action on water quality. In 2017, we campaigned against the massively controversial Central Plains water scheme. People from across the Canterbury region submitted against it, campaigned against it, and when it went ahead anyway, groups like Greenpeace were there to slow down the construction. It all worked together to create a wave of resistance that eventually resulted in the government pulling the plug on public funding for new irrigation schemes. Along with Forest and Bird, Ngāti Kahungunu and locals in Central Hawke's Bay, we fought against the Ruataniwha Dam, which proposed flooding conservation land, destroying habitats for vulnerable native wildlife. This coalition worked tirelessly, ensuring the dam never got off the ground. We've campaigned hard to phase out the use of synthetic nitrogen fertiliser and won a cap on its use in 2021. This was groundbreaking because it shifted the paradigm of managing freshwater away from dealing with pollution after it's in the environment to stopping pollution at its source. In 2021, we launched our free nitrate testing program. To date, we have helped more than 2,000 people test their drinking water for nitrate contamination, and we've built the largest dataset of its kind in the country. In 2023, we launched the Know Your Nitrate map to show the scale and extent of nitrate contamination across the country. Today we've been in Oxford running our water testing program from the Oxford Town Hall. Across the day we've tested 62 samples from folks around Oxford area. People who are on the town supply and a lot of people as well who get their water from private bores. For a lot of people who came to have their water tested, they actually already know what the issue is. It's not new to them that there is an issue with nitrate contamination in drinking water. They understand it's intensive dairy farming, they understand that it's synthetic nitrogen fertiliser that's contaminating the water. You get a sense that after talking them through the test result and what it means, that they feel at least empowered with that information. Our water testing events have inspired many people to do something about the nitrate contamination in their drinking water. Lewis Arivalo is one of those many people in Canterbury. He and his wife formed a group in their community called the Waimakariri Residents Against Nitrate.
Yeah, we've just started up a wee group here after getting our water tested through Greenpeace, and quite infuriated with the level that came through, so we decided to do something about it. We've had 4 meetings since then. We've met with the council. We've social media. You know, the group is slowly growing. Yeah, 11.3 was set in 1958. Yeah. We've landed men on the moon. right, since then. Years ago, I'm old enough to remember when the tobacco industry was saying that smoking was fine, and scientists and academics and doctors were saying that it wasn't. Drinking alcohol while you're pregnant was fine, and now it's been proven that it's not. Well, there's a tsunami coming. You know, this is going to be a health issue, if not already. It's going to be something in the next 10, 20 years, and why not cut it off at the source?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'd like to understand is why they're not taking a precautionary approach to this. Right? There's international research. We are standing on the shoulders of scientists, of giants, of academics who are saying there's an issue here. Why not take a precautionary approach? It's not going to hurt you to do that. I mean, I could probably, we're not going to talk about the elephant in the room right now, but we can all probably imagine why they don't want to start making waves.
The elephant in the room is, of course, New Zealand's role in the global dairy industry. Through this whole journey, countless people have spoken about the challenges they've faced standing up for freshwater protection against big dairy. After all, the people most impacted by nitrate contamination are rural communities deep in dairy country. Fonterra is New Zealand's largest company and the world's largest exporter of dairy. 95% of New Zealand's dairy is shipped overseas, the majority of which is milk powder, and used by multinational companies to make chocolate bars and luxury products. We're at the knife edge of corporate greed. New Zealand is connected to a global corporate machine that's extracting dairy at the expense of the lakes, rivers, and drinking water. People across the region are more aware than ever that the intensive dairy industry and the use of synthetic nitrogen fertiliser is polluting the drinking water that they rely on to live and contaminating the lakes and rivers that they fish from and swim in. We are ready to protect lakes, rivers and drinking water in this region and across the country. With everyone with us, we can demand clean drinking water and swimmable rivers now. History has shown that when communities come together and use their collective power to fight for change, no Goliath is too big.